Bryant Young did a conference call with the local Bay Area media because he's going into the Niners Hall of Fame, which is, I mean, he belongs. And he was at I was reading about it. Matt Barrows in The Athletic wrote if he thought Nick Bosa could break his sack record. He was talking about how he thought Aldon Smith was going to break it. And obviously, 44 sacks in 5 years, the pace was incredible. He was almost halfway there. And then.
Love your 50.
Huh?
I love that you put Cassius Marsh on this list. For those listening to the podcast, Guy has a visual up.
I think you do. I just put some of the great sackers, John. So here's the list. Bryant Young, 89.5 sacks. Number 1. Niners, franchise history. Charles Haley, number 2. 66.5. So Bryant Young is number 1 by a wide margin. Ahmad Brooks, 51.5. Dana Stubblefield, 46.5. Just some other reference points. Aldon Smith and Justin Smith are 6th and 7th, 44, and Justin 43.5. Would Justin be like, I should have more than Aldon because I gave him half of his sacks? Chris Dolman was 8th. DeForest Buckner, John, was 13th on the list, 28.5. Incredible. Eric Armstead has 19. Bosa has 9. Cassius Marsh, right on Bosa's heels at 7.5.
I'd say Aldon is the one guy on this list that you go left a lot to be on the table and to be desired, right? He had the opportunity to have a Von Miller career. I mean, he would have been a Hall of Famer if he could have kept it in the straight and narrow. He was elite. Chandler Jones, he was dominant. He would have kicked ass even on the shitty teams. Then when they got good again, he would have been awesome. So because when you think 49ers, what's weird is I was just doing in my head when you were reading this off. If we went every other position, right? Who's the best Niner quarterback? Who's the best Niner wide receiver? Who's the best Niner tight end? Hell, the tackle now. Joe Staley kind of became that. Now you got Trent Williams. Who's the best safety? I don't know, Ronnie Lott. But Tim McDonald still was pretty good. Corners. Well, Deion was only here for a year, but they still had Deion Sanders for a year. Richard Sherman's going to have a 3 or 4 year career as a Niner. Patrick Willis, Navarro Bowman, they've had great players at every other position, but you go pass rusher, they haven't had multiple LTs. That's just been the one position because Bryant Young was a defensive tackle.
Yeah.
Nick Bosa, and that's where I get back to Aldon, they did nail the pick. Aldon was everything you'd want in a top 10 pick, right? He's a guy that you thought
blue chip talent who is who's reaching his potential.
Yeah, who's physically different, that has the physical attributes, who can execute it. It was just against the best. It was awesome. This is where I always like to pump the brakes a little bit, just because if I would ask you in 2005 how many majors Tiger would, and he was probably a much more concrete than the Bosa or even Aldon, you'd have been like, I don't see how he doesn't win 30 majors, right? He's not going to beat Jack's record. He's going to fly by it. And things just change because I'd go Nick Bosa, one major advantage he has, he's an outside pass rusher. So when you look at outside pass rushers, they have more sacks than interior pass rushers. And you look at Bryant Young's career numbers, he only had double-digit sacks a couple times. I wrote down his first 2 years, guy, he only had 12 sacks. So Nick Bosa only needs 3 next year to just match his pace. I think it's fair to say he'll probably just has another average year, given that he's going to be a little better because he's going to know how to play. He's already played in the league. He'll probably be, if you say, what would you guess Bosa gets next year? I'd be like 10 to 12. So already he's probably around 20, so he's going to be well ahead of the pace. He also has the ability, unlike Bryant Young, he could have a stretch in 2 seasons in the peak of his powers to go 18 and 20 in back-to-back years and all of a sudden have 38 to 40 sacks in a 35, 38 game stretch.
Yeah.
Or have a 40 game stretch where he averages a sack a game type deal, which is impossible for a defensive tackle unless you're Aaron Donald. And even then, I bet if we look at the numbers, it's not as possible as you think. So I'd say that, yeah, but there's a lot of unknown. He's a guy that's been injured before. I think to get there, he'd probably need 7 pretty damn elite years. He'd have a chance. But 7 years, that means he keeps kicking ass. They give him a huge contract, and he keeps kicking ass, right? He's the ultimate draft pick. He's everything you desire in a number 2 overall pick. And I'd say based on 1 year, you'd say, how would you argue?
I'll go – well, so by the way, to your point on Bryant Young's highs, he had 5 years with 8 sacks or more. 5. He also played 14 seasons for the same team, right? So, I mean, that in and of itself is what makes it so unique that most players don't play 14 years in the NFL, let alone 7, let alone 14 for the same team. Von Miller has 106 career sacks. It took Von 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. It took him 8 years to have more sacks than Bryant Young. In part because his third year in the league, he only had 5 sacks. He played 9 games.
For his ACL, yeah.
Came back at 14 sacks after that. But we're talking, here's Von Miller's sack totals. 11.5, 18.5, 5, 14, 11, 13.5, 10, 14.5. And last year he was 8. Okay? He missed, outside of that ACL year, 2 games.
So he plays every game, and he's had multiple, 3 seasons over 14.
I will say this, right? And I agree with you. I mean, like, talking about how long till he gets 80 and a half more sacks, because that's what we're talking about here. Or 81 sacks is what we're talking about here with Bosa to pass Bryant Young. The one thing you would say with Bosa is he is what it looks like, right? Like when Ahmad Brooks became a Niner, you wouldn't have said, pretty sure that guy will be third on the all-time sacks list, right?
No, but he really benefited, and I like Ahmad Brooks. He was by far the worst linebacker of the group. Now, the bar's high. It was Bowman, Willis, and Alden, and their defensive line with Justin Smith and Ray McDonald. He did, in a weird way, get to fly under the radar a little bit, especially after that rookie year for Alden. It was like, Jesus Christ, we got to double team that guy. So sometimes, like, I bet if you look into Alden, for example, Vaughn last year, what happened? DeMarcus Ware's not there. Bradley Chubb gets injured. All of a sudden, it's like, well, he's the only. I bet, wouldn't you imagine if I tell you Bradley Chubb plays 16 games, what would you imagine Vaughn's sack number is? Back to like 13, 14?
Yeah, 12 and a half.
So you are, and this is where the Niners do value it, but it is like you do have to have help to have these numbers. Like you brought this up. Bryant played with a lot of good players, right?
But I would say you look at these guys, they all did. Charles Haley came to a really good 49ers team. Initially was on a really good 49ers team, left, and then he was old, he came back. But he got most of those early. But Ahmad Brooks, to your point, Alden and Justin together, Chris Dolman, yes, Armstead and DeForest Buckner together. That's where I think Bosa's on a team now that has 2 things that I think a pass rusher needs, or that would help a pass rusher rack up stats. A really good offense, so your team is playing with the lead, the other team has to throw. And obviously now it's a throwing league more so than it's ever been. That helps them too. But a really good offense and a team that prioritizes its defensive line. You could argue the Niners prioritize the defensive line more than they prioritize anything else on the team, right? So Bosa should, if the Niners just keep doing what they're doing, be surrounded by good. They are prioritizing putting good players around Nick Bosa constantly, which on one hand you go, well, some of those guys are going to steal his sacks. Yeah, maybe. But in the end, what do we see? If you're on a team with good pass rushers, everybody gets big numbers, not everybody gets small numbers because they're stealing each other's sacks. There's going to be a lot of sacks to go around.
A lot of chicken to be passed out, right? How many sacks would you guess Nick's brother Joey has right now through 4 seasons?
45?
It would be 45 probably. He got hurt 2 years ago. He only I don't remember what his injury was, but he only played in 7 games. He has 40. Okay. 10.5, 12.5. Second year plays in 6, starts 6 games, 5.5, and then last year 11.5. So to me, like if Bosa's Nick just has the 10.5, 11.5s every year, well, I bet you'd be like, well, what does he play with? Another great pass rusher in Melvin Ingram, who's also a double-digit guy every year. So that's a good thing. You just keep racking up double digits, you'll fly up this list. I would say there is no excuse if he can just stay relatively healthy for him not to be the number 2 overall guy one day. Now, the 90 thing, to me, there is a longevity there.
Right.
I think it's fair to say, like, Vaughn's won a Super Bowl MVP. He's going to go down as one of the great all-time pass rushers. You'd probably say in the history of the Denver Broncos, beside Elway, there's probably a legit argument he's the second best player in the history of the franchise, right? And he's at 104. or 106 or whatever. But I bet Vaughn, if he walked in
Steve
right
Atwater?
now,
Yeah, better.
yeah, I
Gary
think Vaughn's
Zimmerman?
a first ballot Isn't he a first ballot Hall of Famer?
Yeah.
Von Miller?
Was Gary Zimmerman a first ballot Hall of Famer?
I'd have to look. I honestly didn't really know who Zimmerman was until Schefter brought him up on like an NFL Live, and I was
Terrell
like,
Davis? Yes, you're right. I think you're probably right.
Yeah. So and Vaughn, right? He ain't done, right? Don't you think he's got a couple more 10 sack seasons in him? Like he's going to end and probably be like 140, and he definitely has like just because he's like an athletic guy, kind of like DeMarcus Ware. He's got remember when Von Miller finished those last 2 years on the Seahawks and got 17 sacks over 2 years? Like that's going to happen.
Yeah.
So it shows you, Nick, there's a longevity aspect, and that's the hard part about football. Like Terrell Davis is in the fucking Hall of Fame, and he really had like 4 seasons. So it's just the nature
aberration. Yeah,
it's the nature of like Bosa could have 5 years. All we'll be talking like Nick Bosa, the best 5-year start in NFL history, and then something happened, right?
But that is what we were saying with Alden.
We still say it. We're like, God, if he just could have put the bottle down, man.
He was so good that you're like, I wouldn't change it. I'd still draft him.
I honestly think people, when I see people talking about him, guy, I almost think people underestimate him. Like, yeah, you talk about like Josh Gordon. Josh Gordon had 1 season. You talk about Randy Gregory, like Alden in a different world than these guys. He was the best player on 13-win teams. Let me repeat, the best player. Like we're talking 18 sacks on a team that is, when they get off the bus, you're like, we're about to get our ass whooped. He was their best player.
Right.
That's why it's like, if you told me this year Alden gets 9 sacks, I'm telling you, I don't expect like, remember those couple good Alden, when his life was out of control in the Raiders, by about the 3rd or 4th game, you're like, God, this guy looks pretty good. Like he was like, does Khalil that smooth? You're like, he's a different beast. And in fairness, like I think Nick, wouldn't you say year 1 of just any athlete you've ever watched, just 1 year playing in big time games, you're like, yeah, this looks pretty special.
Well,
right?
It didn't look like 9 sacks. It looked like 14.5 sacks, didn't it?
Well, because he was kicking ass in the playoff games. Yeah, he's everywhere. He's like, even the plays that he misses, he's like touching their shoelace as they're jumping away. You're right. And part of Alden, like if I told you I got 10 peak years of Alden, 10-year peak years of Nick, and I think if we could go back, you would take Alden, right? He's just longer. It's just he can play in any scheme. I think Nick probably could too, but it just shows you like Nick's probably that next tier down, which is still a damn good tier.
Yeah, which
like
is an all-pro.
He could be a Hall of.
That's the thing with Alden, right? Alden in some ways you're like, oh, he didn't realize his potential. Well, he didn't realize his longevity maybe, but he did show us just it was not. God, I wonder how good Alden could be if he put it all together. No, he put it all together. We saw it. We knew how good he was. Yeah, it's wild.